GM, thank you for tuning in to Sunday Dinner. I'm your host, Zach Radio, and I'm super excited for the guest that I have on the show today. Tech entrepreneur, founder of Metaverse, one of the most educational and newsworthy platforms that I've been associated with from a consumer and standpoint. Co-founder of MV3, one of the most innovative NFT projects that I've come across, and we'll get into that throughout the show. And he's preparing to launch Eluna AI. Welcome to the show today, Roberto Nickson. How you doing today, sir?
What up, dude? Zach, how are you, man? I'm doing fine. Everything good over here. Rainy day out here in Charlotte, NC. But everything's cool, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for taking the time out your active schedule to be on the show to talk to the community. You just brought it up, North Carolina. So you mentioned that you and your family made the transition from LA all the way to North Carolina. How's that been? Because it's a big difference.
Yeah, man. No, big difference. It's been good. You know, it's like my life the last few years has just been like 12 hours every day of working, so I could do that from anywhere, right? As long as I have Wi-Fi. I guess the community's been like the biggest change. Like LA has like such a creative, interesting vibe, but like what I've sort of reconciled that by I'll take like 5 trips out there a year for like a week at a time, and then just try to like schedule all my meetings, meetups, coffee meetups, whatever, while I'm out there. So I mean, for me, it hasn't been that much of a difference. In fact, I love the East Coast. Like, I grew up in Virginia, so I'm an East Coast kid at heart.
No, definitely. It seems like North Carolina has become a great place for people to relocate. The population is growing consistently. I've been reading, and I think it's like what top 5 and most friendliest places to relocate to in 2023. So my family lives down there as well, so I'm pretty familiar with the Charlotte area mostly. But yeah, North Carolina is a big difference from LA for sure. But with that being said, Roberto, I've became more familiar with you and your creative process with the launch of MV3. For those who aren't aware, can you kind of give a little details on what MV3 is?
Yes, so MV3 is a digital collectibles project. We have 6,500 characters on board. There's also been I don't call it a secondary collection, but we airdropped all holders another art initiative that was called Singularity. But what it really is in reality, is, I mean, it's really my sister's sort of like passion project, and where she's a writer. She's written on Stranger Things, on Narcos Mexico, HBO's The Outsider. Now she has her own shows that she's going to be show running. And one thing that my sister, when we had our initial discussions like regarding MV3, is like and really I think any creative or creator can sort of resonate or relate to this, but it sucks like putting in your talent, your resources, your energy, your blood, sweat, and tears, like creating these incredible characters, storylines, and IP that you have no ownership in. And so what NFTs like brought to us, what we really thought was interesting is like we can build out these timeless characters and storylines, which my sister is really good at doing anyways, and really kind of like have the ownership, and then hopefully one day be able to like really meaningfully split that ownership with the community. The one thing is like right now, in order to do that, like we'd have to have, Ethereum sort of classified as a security, but we're looking at like perhaps other ways to do it. But a co-created sort of story was what we set out to build. And so we're just super excited. It's a long-term thing, making a movie or show, but I do think it'll be made 2-3 years from now. And so we could segue into another thing, but like my thing is like, okay, I'm a builder at heart. I've been building product and SaaS tools for the greater part of the last 10 years. I was like, so in the meantime, while that story is being developed on the film side, it's like, why don't we do another thing that I love NFTs is, why don't we build access into them, like software keys? And so that's why we're building Eluna and some of these other tools. But I'll stop there.
No, thank you for elaborating. And one thing that I've really been intrigued about is the in-depth details of the main characters that are slowly being presented monthly for the community to kind of get more familiar. And you guys most recently kind of touched on who like the 5 main characters would be. It was Elon Trust, if I'm not mistaken. I forgot his daughter's name. I can't think of his daughter's name. And then we had the Wiz and a couple other characters. What character are you looking forward to be presented the most? Like, who would you say is like your favorite character thus far?
Yeah, so there's right now 16 core characters as we're calling them. There's actually 17 in the initial script. There's one called Josiah that didn't make it to the collection, but he does have a speaking role in the script. And those are like the main characters. There's obviously like when you read the script, Eluna City that Jay Mays is developing, there's a lot more obviously speaking roles than just 17, but we're kind of classifying those as the 17, but really there's in reality 16 main characters. The ones that I believe are like most prominent that are like, you know, if you're calling them like the main characters, and definitely Eli Trust, his daughter, which is Cosima Trust, and then there's Malik, the Wiz, and I would say like all of them are core characters, main characters, but I would say those are like the main four that the story really revolves around. And yeah, I mean, like for me, I just think the most timeless and important things in the world are good stories and characters. They never die. And like we see, you know, like look at Harry Potter, look at all of these great stories that become, you know, these timeless forever IP franchises that can generate billions and billions of dollars, really basically in perpetuity. And I think really in reality, like grand vision long term, that's what we're trying to build, is one of these super strong IP franchises that can sort of live forever.
On that note, one of the cool features that I noticed that MV3 is providing is the holders can connect their wallet and create like a backstory and a name for their specific characters. Now, I might be thinking too far ahead, but could some of these storylines potentially, depending on the specific character, of course, be put in you and your sister's storyline in the future?
Yeah. So basically, one of the cool things is like people are able to connect to the hub on mv3.io and write their own stories and actively. So when you think of a script, right, you know, there's always sort of references and homages, whether it be, you know, Gotham City, there's certain like restaurant names that might make it to the show, or like certain kind of like less prominent characters that are being referred to. And so being baked into the script are like, you know, we're always kind of looking at the stories being written in the hub on the back end. And our hope is to like is to pay homage to certain characters, you know, that the community are creating on that hub, you know, in certain storylines that we can reference in like really fun ways, sort of Easter eggs that only like, you know, the MP3 community would be able to kind of understand. So I think that could be a lot of fun.
Definitely. So on top of MV3, you're also working on continuously building your metaverse company, which I mentioned prior. In my opinion, is one of the most newsworthy and educational like social media pages, whether it's Instagram and Twitter, that anyone who's wanting to learn can even tap into. What are some of the things that you and your team are doing to stay on top? Because if I ever want to find out about something, if I want to be educated on how to do something, I could either go to your social media or metaverse. What are you guys are doing to stay on top of that?
Yeah. What we're doing is just working 24/7 nonstop. I mean, like that's really, you know, like people always ask, man, how are you always getting news on metaverse? How are you producing all this content? There's no secret sauce. I just work my ass off, right? So um, when it comes to metaverse, like the grand ambition is something that we've been a lot more leaning into. And I think matter of fact, some crazy news might be coming in the next month. We'll see. But I like there might be some sort of like ground shaking news coming in the next month. We'll see. I have a lot of meetings lined up over the next 2 weeks to get a little more clarity. But I do think like metaverse has this potential to become. I've been calling it, say, The Verge meets Complex, or TechCrunch meets Hypebeast, right? Where it's sort of like this culture forward media outlet covering all things emerging tech, native to Web3. I think that's always going to be like the bread and butter. You know, but one thing is like I've been trying to like position that brand to cover really all of emerging tech, right? Whether it be Web3, NFTs, or whether it be like metaverse, you know, AR, VR, mixed reality, AI, machine learning, and really, I want to like cover all, and like even not emerging tech, like adjacent finance and cultural news, as we've seen with like the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. So we're going to be covering like sort of all things that are adjacent, you know, to the combination and sort of like the intersection of culture, finance, and technology. And I do think there's a really big play there, and it's also important for the ecosystem to have sort of like a trusted, influential leader in the media space. And so that's really like the grand high, you know, overarching goal of metaverse, and we'll see, you know, we'll see what happens over the next few months.
You doing so many things in the tech side, but you're also a established content creator who is consistently putting out great content. What feedback would you give to content creators who are looking to create new ways to build community?
Uh, the first word that comes to mind is start, which is sort of like my mantra this year and probably into next year. I'm just going to be like, making content around starting all day, every day, because that's really just truly is like, that is the unlock. That is the key. As simple and basic as it is, that's what's holding so many people back. And it manifests in a couple ways. And one way that it manifests is in fear of what other people might think. I think we've all been plagued by that in one way, shape, or form in varying intensities. But that definitely plagued me. I used to really care about what people would think, and then I realized like there's a couple things that you realize, sort of a few truths that really set you free. And that's one is like, bro, like nobody really gives a shit about you, like ultimately, right? Like and I say it that way. I say it like sort of brashly like that, just to, like whatever, raise some eyebrows. But in reality, it's true. Like everybody's so worried about themselves. Nobody's really paying attention to what other people are doing. And then I always say, like, if you're worried about people judging you for trying something new, shouldn't be worrying about those people anyways. What I've noticed is if somebody's judging you for literally trying something new, whether that be a piece of content, a business, whatever it is, those people are generally just projecting their own insecurities. And so it's a reflection on them, not on you. That shouldn't matter. But my big thing before, like, we could talk about actual strategies, how to create content, how to produce, how to resonate with an audience, communicate, etc. But like the big thing is just to start and do it consistently every day for a long time, because that's another thing that deters people. They'll start, they'll get no views, they'll get no traction. And by the way, even Mr. Beast, he says that when content creators come up to him for advice, he'll ask them, how many videos have you made? And he won't even consider talking to somebody unless they've made 100 videos. And so that's kind of like, I've adopted that same sort of mentality, is like, if you're starting to produce content, like, please don't get discouraged until you've made at least 100 videos or pieces of content or whatever it may be, or podcast episodes, whatever it may be that you're doing. And then after 100, if it's not working, okay, then we could talk. Let's, switch up strategy, see what's working, what's not working. But it's sort of like a lifetime learning experience. And so that's a long, long answer to just say start. That's the game. That's the key.
No, thank you for elaborating, because someone like myself who I feel I'm a content creator and continuously looking for new ways to work smarter and not necessarily harder. And going to your platforms, you provide so many tools.
Can I interrupt real quick though?
Oh, by all means.
That quote, I hate that quote. Work smarter and not harder, because the reality is that the world is savage, is highly competitive, especially the world of content. It's the most competitive arena there is on the planet. You got to work smarter and harder. And unfortunately, like that I get the sentiment behind that quote, but it's got to be both. But sorry, go ahead.
No, completely. And thank you for noting that, because you are correct. But your social medias provide informational content and educational content for someone who is looking for ways to work smarter and harder in that aspect. What are some of your favorite tools that you've been using with your day-to-day content creating?
The main tools that I use, and I have like a comprehensive list on my what's called blog newsletter. But the main tools that I use are Figma, really for all visual content. So anything that you see on Eluna, Metaverse, RP Nickson, like any of the sort of media entities that I run, it's all done in Figma. There are some particular use cases where I'll bring some Photoshop in, some of the things that you can't really do in Figma. And then on the video side, it's just been Premiere. And again, like in some particular instances, I'll need to use After Effects. Like if I am, going to do like some fancy animation or something, I might do that in After Effects. But it's Figma for visual content, and it's Premiere for video content.
Definitely. So for those who aren't aware, what is Eluna.ai?
Yeah, so this is something I'm really, really, really like. This is one of the coolest things I think that we've ever built. Like the team behind it, like, are just straight savages. I keep saying it. Like I've always thought I was a hard worker until I started working with Efe, Greg B. Parker. Shout out, he's by the way the top MV3 collector, and Suha, and these guys like kind of like put me to shame. And I feel like a baby working with these guys. Like they're just complete savages. But Eluna is really three parts, right? Like the main objective of Eluna is that we have a belief that AI should be able to augment the human creative process. It should not replace it, right? And there's a fear that it's going to replace creativity. I actually think that it can be, uh, boost creativity and democratize creativity. And so what we're doing with Eluna, number one, is that we're building a comprehensive suite of productivity and creativity tools for business and creative professionals. The first product that we're going to come out with is not reinventing the wheel. It's really kind of like a wrapper on Stable Diffusion. It's text to image. However, it's over the last 3 months, we've been tweaking our own model based on Stable Diffusion 2.1 and Dream Booth. And I I just can't wait for the site to come out for people to try it. Like I want people to compare the same prompt in Eluna versus whether, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, Leonardo, and some others. Like I do think we're on to something special. And then we're going to be launching like several other tools. Like I'm not sure what order it will go in, but they're going to be, just like a comprehensive suite. So it'll be remove background. It'll be blurring faces for photo and video. There's going to be like 20 to 25 tools, I think, that we'll bake in over the next year to really boost creativity and productivity. In that same suite, there's also going to be a media play. So there'll be journalism involved. And under that same subscription, I think the pro subscription will probably be coming in at around $25 a month. In that same $25 a month, you get access to the media suite. So the same way that, Washington Post or New York Times is paywalled, you'll also have access to these articles, how-tos, best practices, etc. And then we have an app, which is honestly like it's coming out really cool, and I think it'll be launched in the next 2 weeks, and very soon thereafter will be feature parity with the website. But the app is going to be the same tools that exist on the website, but then we have a full, fully advanced sort of photo and video editor, and then we're also building all these design tools in it. We're actually reusing a lot of the code from my old app called Design Lab that I've since sold. But and you'll also be able to mint on Polygon for free, unlimited in that pro subscription, and to mint on Ethereum, you'll actually have to pay for that. But so it's like the first app in the world where you'll be able to generate your own AI art, and not just art, like anything, and then mint it as an NFT in the same app, in the same environment. And then there's obviously a lot of community features involved on top of that within the app. So this will launch to the MV3 community next week, and then probably publicly it's going to be a tiered rollout. I can't say for sure. Probably in about 2 or 3 weeks, though.
You stay working, huh, Roberto?
Man, recently it's all I do, man. I got a daughter on the way coming in 6 months, so I told my wife, hey, every single waking minute of my life, I'm getting after it, man, because I want to be in a position to really take time off when my daughter arrives and just sort of have the team take over, and I'm going to disappear for a couple months. So,
I mean, you're definitely putting in the work and providing a lot of good experience and a lot of good information to the community. So I definitely appreciate that. Now, you having a really good understanding of AI and how fast it's making its transition to mainstream. What's your perception and feedback on how AI could potentially adjust the normal day-to-day jobs? Because that's been kind of the talk when it comes to AI, whether you work in banking, whether you work as an artist, AI can potentially replace these jobs. What's your feedback on that, and what feedback can you give to someone to make sure they're not being left behind throughout this process?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. I mean, first off, I'm fascinated with AI, and that's the entire reason that, like, if you look at MV3, the entire storyline is really AI based. It revolves around, what it really is exploring it's like, I actually told my sister, I think you might be writing a nonfiction, but what it really is exploring a future well after AGI, perhaps when AI becomes sentient, and the way that it's going to really impact and divide our society in many ways, but also sort of like improve, accelerate our society. So it's a story about two sides, right? It's the story about like humans break up into two factions, really. One side believes that, hey, these sentient AI, these sentient robots, they deserve their own rights, right? Like they deserve their own human freedoms and rights. And then there's the other side that says, no, we created them, they're our slaves. And so there's a lot of parallels to history, right? The last 2,000 years of human history. more recently, like even slavery in the US, right? And so like it's really, really well written. It's very introspective. It's not as much of like Marvel as people might think it is. It's a lot more raw. It's a pretty dark world, I would say, and it's just like a very, very introspective story. And like Cosima Trust, I think, is going to be one of the most beloved characters in the world. She's the face of the revolution, and she's really like, she is the freedom fighter. She's like, every Simone Bolivar mixed with Martin Luther King, mixed with like you name it, right? Like she's just an incredibly complex and beautiful character. But I digress. So I was like, AI is really, really central to our interests and our passions. But do I think AI is going to replace a lot of jobs? I don't think I know. Like a lot of jobs are going to be replaced, but this has been the story of technological, advancement and progress throughout times. And I do believe in a lot in like the World Economic Forum actually, it was called the Future of Jobs report. They were saying that AI may displace 85 million jobs by 2030 or something like that, but 100 million new jobs would be created. And I kind of feel like, again, that's consistent with technological advancement throughout history. And I kind of feel like that's true, right? Like it is going to replace a lot of jobs, but it's also going to create a lot more opportunity. And again, like we've seen that, right? Like look at what look at the beginning of the 20th century. I think like half the country worked on farms, right? And then with the emergence of, tractors and like technological innovation and robotics, a lot of these farm workers were displaced to the point where now there's only like 3% of the country works on farms, but with the same output, right? But what happened was a lot of new jobs were created, design and engineering, installation, maintenance, monitoring, and I just believe that's how innovation works. And so when I look at AI, I think it's going to be very much the same. The same fear will exist. But I look at it a lot more optimistically than most people do until AGI arrives, and then I'm not so sure.
Thank you for elaborating on that, Roberto. Another application that you're working on amongst the 30 that's under your umbrella right now. Can you kind of discuss a little bit about Tone Studio and what that does and what that's going to bring to the ecosystem?
Yeah, Tone. I mean, it's an app that me and my team built. It's spearheaded by two of the biggest influencers on Instagram, Jack Morris and Lauren Bullen, and they're just like awesome creatives that I really admire. Tone's doing really well. We're up to, I think, 20,000 paid subscribers now. And, funny enough, like out of all the shit that I've been working on over like the last year and a half, I've made no money. Like I'm down on every single project. I wouldn't say down. It's been an investment, right? It's not like I've lost money. I've invested money. But so Tone has really been like, I'm obviously working off of all my savings from the businesses that I've sold in the past, but like Tone has really been my big income stream. That's why I'm kind of safe with that. And by the way, this is be a segue, but I love recurring revenue. I love SaaS products. This is why we're going back into building them, because Tone, it's like incredible. 20,000 paid subscribers every month. We get 33% of that. I think Jack 33, Lauren 33. And that income stream is just so consistent. It's so steady. It compounds and increases month by month, probably for the rest of our lives. And so like SaaS is just the best business model in the world. And that's why we're building SaaS products, tying MV3 as tokens, software licenses to these SaaS products. Because another thing that I'd like to talk about, I'm sorry, this is very controversial, but there is no business model in Web3. I think Web3 is an accelerant and a way to to build community around existing brands. But what we've seen, and this is why every single project, including all blue chip projects, are going to go to zero. And I hate saying this, but it's all Ponzi-nomics. The only way to increase value in these tokens is by giving them access to more Ponzi tokens. Like it just is what it is. And we're going to see this play out. And the only way to stop this is for these businesses brands to actually build business models around them. And here's the crazy shit about it, right? So I'm building Eluna. We're building Eluna. MV3 is going to have access to it, $25 a month. So that's $300 a year baked into that, 3,000 plus every year. And then we're talking with like all the other big AI tools, and not just AI, a lot of these creativity companies to eventually build access to their products and with MV3. So it's like, to me, like you have to actually build tangible value into these things. Everybody wants to play this speculative game, which is just unsustainable in the long term. And I'm telling you, like, there's no project that's good. Like the highs that we saw in the last bull market will never be reached again. They will never be reached again. And I say this and people are like, oh no, the next bull run. I'm like, tell me why, like there has to be actual value assigned. And I shit you not, I never want to out these founders, but like the founders of the projects you guys know and love, when I'm telling them what our plan is, how to build actual utility and actual value into these tokens, they tell me, Roberto, don't do that, because then you've assigned value. Then you can't go to the moon. They're like, instead, what you want to do is just tell everybody that something big is around the corner in perpetuity forever. So your favorite projects are doing this. I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to out them. I'm not going to say their name, but this is their plan. They're just going to Ponzi it up forever as long as they can. But now that the royalties are gone, there's no business model. There's no way for them to make money. So I'm telling you, this space is all going to go to zero unless people bake actual value, utility. And granted, it's a long-term game. Like Bored Ape Yacht Club, maybe they do make other side. Maybe they do get millions of participants into the game, and then they're good. They have a product. But those that are not sort of like trending towards an actual product, service, platform, there's just no business model, and then they'll all trend to zero. And it's going to happen. So.
Thank you so much, Roberto. I appreciate that knowledge and that feedback. Now, there was a new contract, the ERC 4337 contract. What's your feedback and opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. It's just it's in, it's nascent. It's in its infancy. But I do think it like the biggest problem that Web3 has to me, besides it actually just being vapor and the, long ago decoupled from actual value, is the UX side of it. So like we are all in this room pretty tech savvy, I'm sure. So like getting into Web3, getting into NFTs, no problem. But like the average person, like think about it, Zach. Like think about like the average person you might bump into in the grocery store, or maybe somebody in your family that you know, an aunt, uncle, grandma, whatever. Like try to have them buy an NFT. All right, how do you do it? Okay, first you got to go to like Binance or Coinbase. Okay, you got to put money into it by ETH. You got to wait like 5 days, first of all, to be approved by some of these sites now. Okay, now you got to send it to a browser-based, wallet that you're the custodian of. Okay, now once you get it there, then you got to go to a platform like OpenSea or Blur, search for the thing, connect your wallet. Like it's impossible. And then if they get through that process, 90% chances are going to get scammed or gotten at some point or the other. Like it literally is. It's like people just assume Web3 is like this bull run or this big mass adoption event is around the corner. It's not until we figure this out. And so ERC 4337 is definitely a step in the right direction, but it's still overly complex, right? Like now what has to happen is UI, UX people, actually builders and product designers have to build on top of that and build like, these actual applications that can onboard people, but at least the underlying tech is being worked on. And so it'll take time, it'll get there. And that's definitely a step in the right direction.
I'm really loving where the blockchain is heading. Obviously we deal with the scam side and the bank side of it, where we have certain discrepancies, but the technology is what we're all here for. And I am very, very much so excited about the tech side. But also, one thing that you do that really inspires me is your consistency. What feedback could you give to someone who is building when it comes to being consistent?
Well, one of the things that really helps me, and granted, like somebody just starting out may not be able to get to this point, just because I'm so many years into this game now, but there's a couple of things here. One thing that really helps me is I've got my process and my system just down, like it's like I can do it with my eyes closed now. Correct. And so that's not always been the case, but once you put in all of this work, it just becomes muscle memory. And so my thing is like, first of all, it's got to be, you have to put in the reps. As painful as it could be at the beginning, as hard it is to stay consistent, like eventually it just becomes muscle memory. And so it is just a game of reps. And so that's number one. Like, and so meaning my advice to somebody just starting out, it may not sound too good. It's like, you got to do it for 2, 3, 5 years, and then you'll become like, you just have to put in the reps. There's no easy way. There's no secret sauce. And you got to just kind of design your life to be able to do it that way, which again, like it's taken me a long time, but now I've designed my life where I have just maximum freedom. And so I'm able to be consistent. Right. And so, but yeah, man, just reps, years and years of work.
One thing a lot of content creators and builders run into is that work-life balance, right? You mentioned you have a wife, you're expecting soon. how do you find that balance, because you're consistently dropping content, you're consistently building new applications, and you have a whole family with you as well? Where's the balance come from?
Yeah, man. Another thing is like, I hate to say it, I think work-life balance is mostly a myth, right? It just all depends on how ambitious you are, like how hard you want, like how much you want it. But I mean, like there's some things that we do, like so for example, like on Fridays after 5, basically, like that's my time with my wife no matter what. The cool thing is my wife's also a full-time job. She leads marketing at Tap and Collective, which is a really dope marketplace for artists. And so that's one good thing, that like we both are workers, but like, the fact is like we both get to work from home, which is also huge, and so we have so much time to hang out. We hang out every night, and then every Friday night we reserve it no matter what, kind of like date night. So that, but it's working from home, which is such a blessing, right? Like I remember a few years ago when I was like, I had an office for MuseWorks, and even before that, some of the jobs that I worked, there was a job, it was a startup called Social Radar, a couple things that I co-founded. We were like going to the office every day, man. It was like 45 minutes there, 45 minutes back. So like an hour and a half in a car, maybe 30 minutes getting ready to go to the office, to go to work, then probably 2 hours just, shooting the shit with people, wasting time back and forth, small talk, all this. And I'm like, wow, like the amount of time that frees up being able to work from home is incredible, man. It's a blessing. So that's another thing that I'm really fortunate to be able to do is be able to work from home again. But yeah, work-life balance is a bit of a myth, man. If you really want to compete at the highest levels, you got to work your ass off, kind of, right? And so my goal, and it may be a little optimistic, but like I said, my goal is to really work my ass off the next 5 or 6 months, and then disappear for 3 months, and then come back and get right back to it.
Your company Metaverse, do you plan on is going to keep growing? Do you plan on adding journalists and content creators to the ecosystem of Metaverse? Because the content, I keep saying it over and over, is amazing, and the word that I love to use is educational. Do you plan on growing that up with more content creators?
Yes, and if you guys know anybody, let me know, because this is one big challenge. People think like creating content is easy. The people that I've hired to in the past, I'm like, all right, let's go create. They'll like, they may come up with like a TikTok per week or like 3 tweets per day, or that I'm like, and being by myself and putting like 30 pieces of content. So it's very, very hard to find somebody good and talented. And here's another reason why: because most people who can do the job as well or better than I can do it, they're not going to want to work for anybody. What's the point of them coming to work for Metaverse? They're going to do their own thing if they're that quality, right? And so it's been a little bit challenging, but the answer is yes. We will be expanding very soon, actually, and that could look like I said, man. I can't really talk too much about it, but the next 2 months, expect to wake up to perhaps potentially some major announcements.
Kind of touching on strategy from a content creator standpoint, and you mentioned like posting 2 TikToks and 3 tweets here and there. What would your expectations be as a content creator on how many posts should be done daily throughout all the platforms? Opinion, of course.
That's a great question. I don't think there's like a necessarily a number. Like some days, especially when you're covering more like breaking, either news or more like or time relevant stories, just some weeks are slammed and some weeks there's nothing going on, right? And so like I'll find myself just like a couple days will go by and I'm barely putting any content out just because there's nothing happening, and then other weeks are just like this upcoming week, I expect to be crazy, because if GPT-4, if the rumors are true, if it's going to be coming out, there's going to be a lot to cover and talk about there, with this bank collapse and all the implications, potential contagion, the domino effect that could produce. There's going to be a lot to talk about there. Let's see what I'll have. But like this week, I expect to just be pumping it out all week long. But so there's no real like standard answer, but I don't know. Like when I talk about this, I feel like I'm a very unpopular sort of like enemy, like kind of like mean spirited person. But I just like, I've seen it so many times, man. I've had people that I've worked with in the past. They'll produce like 6 pieces of content, then go need to take like a 2-week mental health break or something. And I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know if it's just me or where I came from, the family that I'm from. But like, I know hard work and I know not hard work. And it's hard for me to kind of like, it's hard for me to position myself or like to work with people who are just not capable. I don't know. It sounds like an asshole thing, but that's why when I'm like working with the team that we're working on now, especially Suha F and Greg B. Parker, man, I'm like, wow, like these guys make me feel like a bitch now, right? So, I don't know. I'm like digressing. I feel like I said, I feel like an asshole when I talk about this, but it is tough. It's tough for me to align myself with people that just don't have that work ethic, you know?
No, I definitely love that. I love that honesty. But from a standpoint of like an individual content creator, because you come from like a media presentation, like a media timeline, if that makes sense. So you're always there's always something. Obviously, some weeks are more active than others. But for that content creator who's doing podcasts, who aren't necessarily reporting on day-to-day news, how often or what feedback would you give them when it comes to marketing and posting their specific content, if that makes sense, Roberto?
You know what, man? I really feel like you have to love what you're doing. Like that's another thing that I think really helps me is like I actually don't care about the W's or the L's, right? Like wins are great to like the more wins you get under your belt, the more confidence you receive. But I honestly think the L's are even more important because the more L's, the more resilient you become, right? And so, like, anyways, the point I'm trying to make is like, don't worry. Like, you have to just fall in love with the process. That's the only thing that matters, right? Because winning, losing, all that shit is sort of irrelevant because you're gonna get value from it all. But like, you're going to burn out if you don't truly love what you're doing. And so when it comes to like how many times you have to be posting and stuff, I really think it depends on the content. 5-6 years ago, it was like you had to be doing it every day. It was like the Casey Neistat style that everybody was following, like daily vlogging, all this. And then like Mr. Beast came around, and like now all these creators are focusing more on quality than quantity. And so it really depends on like my stuff. Like I'm trying to pump out like one per day just because it takes me like an hour. It doesn't take me a lot of time. But if I was doing like, because they're just short form, little like, I just talk in front of the camera, blah, blah, blah. Okay, get it out there. But if I was doing like more, 5 to 10 minute, like longer form, higher production value where, then I'd probably suggest, hey, quality over quantity, take your time, put out the best content that you can put out. And don't worry about the day to day stuff. My content is like, I like it because it's so easily scalable. I'm just turning on a camera and talking into the camera, like if I had to go out in the street and like bring a videographer with me and like, come up with sets like a Mr. Beast or something, like I wouldn't be able to produce at the speed I'm able to produce. So it all really depends on the creator. But unfortunately for a lot of these platforms, the algorithm really does reward activity. And so like Instagram, for example, there is definitely, if you are putting up stories every day, and you don't let any minute go by where you do not have a story up on your profile, as an example, Instagram is going to prioritize you, and those stories are going to do better. Same as posts. So it's like, it's kind of a shitty thing because it's such a competitive landscape that you do really need to be putting out content like always consistently. But I don't think it's as important as people make it out to be, because there's some people that are like, you have to post every day. I don't necessarily think that's the case. So
You previously touched on GPT-4. What, for those who aren't aware, like what are you expecting to come from that, and how big of a game changer will GPT-4 be, in your opinion?
well, nobody really knows, right? Like I always see these tweets coming out like, oh, GPT-4 is going to be based on a trillion parameter or 100 trillion parameters. And that's all bullshit. Like Sam Altman even came out and said anybody who expects that many parameters are probably going to be disappointed. And like the fact of the matter is nobody really knows. But the last week, the CTO of Microsoft Germany came out and said that it was going to be coming out next week. But that's the only sort of confirmation that we've had from Microsoft. And he kind of gave some hints at it, saying that it's going to be capable of multimodality. And I made a video on it today. But basically, I think that is a big game changer because of the way that we can interface with some of these LLMs. So like right now, you can go to ChatGPT. Everybody's familiar with it. But if GPT-4 is multimodal and then they bake it into ChatGPT, which I'm sure they would, it's a flagship product. But like it's crazy the amount of like data that can be understood by these models in context. So for example, maybe like I made the example today, maybe there's a picture of like 100 people. You could ask ChatGPT, hey, do you recognize any of these people? And if so, can you give me their names, give me their backgrounds, how are they connected? Like it's going to be able to, to really like just understand what you're asking for it in context. So like another example, that I gave today, maybe there's a picture of 3 people, and hey, the person on the left, where's that shirt from? You know, like it'll be able to understand, recognize, and really, you know, kind of like output these queries in a much more, like, what's the word? Just in a much more robust way, which I think is tremendously exciting.
Thank you. So one post that you did, it was discussing like the master class of branding, and the example that you used was Liquid Death, the beverage, the water, and you elaborated on how strategic they were with their marketing. They're selling water, and if you haven't seen the video that he posted on his Instagram regarding like branding and marketing and how strategic Liquid Death was promoting their water, how important is branding and marketing to you, Roberto?
I mean, with the Liquid Death example, it's everything, right? Because it's the easy. Anybody can sell water. Their water's not that special. In fact, I think it like kind of tastes shitty. You know, and anybody can really do it. So like their moat was really their brand. That's the only reason people are buying that, is because of the way it makes them feel, right? Like the emotions it evoked, the way that the brand told their stories. So I think it's like, it's really important. I mean, let's look at NFTs. Like people are selling vapor, you know, like people are just selling, and it's like the way that the reason why some of them are valued so much. Let's take Azuki as an example. They've been masterful. They've put on a master class as well in branding, in telling that story, in evoking certain feelings, etc. Correct. And so, I mean, it's, you know, like it's everything for better or for worse. Granted, eventually, you know, like the product has to be, you know, who knows, like Liquid Death, yeah, the novelty eventually wears off no matter what, correct? And so what is left is the actual product. And so who knows, like it's up to people to decide whether the water tastes good, whether they like the beverage. Eventually, once the novelty of the branding wears off, and then you know, then the product is left, and that's what's most important. But man, no, brand is everything, dude.
I want to be very mindful of your time, Roberto. So I only have a couple more questions. So from a Web3 NFT standpoint, what are some of your favorite collections outside of the ones that you've created yourself?
Um, there's so many that I love and that I respect. The only one that I would probably buy is Azuki. Like if I'm just being honest, I do think they'll figure out eventually a product. But here's another thing, bro. Like I have to say this as well. If there's no product to tie in actual value to, what's going to end up happening. And again, I hesitate saying this because it's a long-term game and anything can happen, especially when we get a little more regulatory guidance and stuff. But like another thing to remember is like, we're not investing into a project. We're not investing into a brand. We're not actually, like, what we're doing is we're holding tokens that represent the brand's ability to manufacture sentiment, because this is what Web3 is in its infancy. It is, I call it the culture casino. I don't even call it Web3. It's a casino. It is, we are trading on manufactured sentiment. And so when you look at Web3, what, we're 3 years into this game now, there's not one product or service that's been built. I mean, it's and even then, like, there's no, I can't think of one. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to, I might sound like a hater or whatever, but what I'm trying to say is like, really what it is, and by the way, I think this is a feature, not a bug, because I've always thought it'd be cool. Like, how cool would it be if you could like bet on people and sort of like bet on the upside of brands and not, but I don't know, man. Like, I just think Azuki is one of those brands that's going to figure it out. Eventually they'll have a product. I think they could crush with like a really dope, you know, mobile game, or they'll figure something out. But ultimately, here's another thing. Like, and when I tell people this, they're like, a lot of people disagree, and I love the disagreement. I love the debate. I love the conversation. But like, you know, let's look at Doodles. You know what's going to happen to Doodles? Eventually they're going to sell for a lot of money. And guess who the winners are? The winners are their founders, the actual investors, you know, and their employees who hold equity. Those are the big winners. The token holders are not going to be winners. The reason why is because if somebody wants to buy Doodles, right? Like say a big venture fund, whatever, wants to buy Doodles, they want to buy Doodles for their economic potential, right? And their ability to continue to accrue capital, correct? And right now in Web3, especially with royalties sort of being taken out of the picture, there is no onus for some of these big, you know, whether it be a fund or a conglomerate or whoever buys whoever. what is the onus for them to continue bringing back to the holders, bringing back value to the holders? At that point, it becomes charity. There's no business model. People can debate with me, people blah blah blah, like, but what people are being sold in this space is complete bullshit, right? And so, like, now granted, maybe that's part of me, like, okay, being salty, because like as a builder, it's like, oh, I see, nobody actually really wants building in the early game, right? Everybody just wants that manufactured sentiment. People want mass adoption as exit liquidity. They don't want mass adoption to, like, they just want mass adoption because that's their exit liquidity. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is this, like, long term, I believe, this is my personal belief, long term, there has to be actual tangible value assigned to these brands. And I hope that we can get to the point where holders can actually become investors as profit participants or as equitable holders. Right now, there's just, without being deemed a security, there's no like real way to do that. But I'm hoping that some of these Yuga lawsuits will give us a lot more clarity, and maybe in the next year or two, we can make that happen. And so that's why I think like Azuki is the one that I'm really impressed by, and we'll figure it out eventually, long term. But again, like, respect to everybody building in the space, because there's a lot of creativity, a lot of innovation, and it is a long-term game.
You have me looking at every NFT project sideways now, Roberto, just FYI.
But like, that's also not my intention, because there is also value in like Metaverse MV3 community, like now, like people who are building content out of this community, they have like a built-in sort of head start where like somebody makes a dope thread, we're all going to like retweet, get behind it, Metaverse account will retweet it. Like, there's value there as well. But I will say, somebody clip this and come back in 3 years. Some of these projects will sell for a lot of money, and the big beneficiaries are the actual investors. And unfortunately, the token holders will be left high and dry unless they figure out an actual business model. And this is why, like Nike, for example, they have the greatest business model in the world, but their stock is never going to be impacted 1 cent, 1 penny, whether their floor is 1 or 30. And people are like, oh, Nike's floor, CloneX floor is going to 0. What a horrible look on Nike's brand equity. Nike doesn't give a shit. Like, this is like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the percentage of their business. Like, it's nothing to them. They could care less. And people should know that, right? Like, people holding these tokens should understand what's actually happening and get out of sort of this echo chamber bubble of a few thousand people that participate in this space every day.
Thank you for elaborating on that, Roberto. One question that I was really intrigued about that I wanted to ask you, MV3 is so innovative. And where do you see it in 5 years? Where do you see that franchise? What is the mindset that you and your sister have in 5 years for MV3?
Like I said, I think the main value is in the stories and characters. And I've always said, like, that is what is timeless. That is what people love. That's what can never die, right? And so when we look at, whether it be, not to compare ourselves to these incredible franchises, but when you look at Harry Potter, when you look at anything, Marvel or DC, or even Stranger Things that my sister worked on, or Fast and Furious, like, a lot of these franchises will live forever. And they'll sort of, like, I almost guarantee, I don't know anything, I don't have any insider info, but I almost guarantee, like, Stranger Things will become something else, like, as these kids age out of the roles, like, there'll be new characters, like, because the brand, the IP, the story, the feeling that it evokes is so strong that it's now, I think, going to be a profitable enterprise and franchise basically forever. So when I look at MV3, like, our true, like, I mean, this is what we want. Like, our ambition, our great dream is to have that manifest, that story manifest as film, as television, as something that people can view, watch, and love, and really, really fall in love with these characters, because the characters that my sister wrote, they're so beautifully complex. The story is not only, I was gonna say, like, the story is not only so compelling and like, it's actually now becoming like somewhat of a, hey, this could actually happen. It's like exploring what could become, of how this technology can really, I don't know if it's destroy our society, but how it can change everything. And so it's just a really, really interesting exploration of that. But that's where I would love to see it, right? And I do believe that if it is on the big screen, if it does become this great franchise, the collectability component behind it could be really outstanding.
Where would you like to see Eluna AI in the next 12 months?
So with Eluna AI, it's a SaaS product. I would love to have that ARR as high as possible. I mean, with Eluna, there's so much interest in it already, like crazy venture interest, etc. This is what I used to do for a living, but I mean, Eluna AI, our North Star is that ARR, right? It's that annual recurring revenue, monthly recurring revenue. That is the game. That's our bread and butter. And so the iterative process behind Eluna, like everything that we're going to be building into it, every month we're going to have new products, new features, that's all going to be baked into that same subscription. So that same subscription becomes more and more and more compelling to the point where we'll probably have to increase the price at some point. But like hopefully with that 20, I don't know if it's going to be 20, 25 bucks a month to start. People are going to get grandfathered into those rates. And again, like having an MV3 character, I think this is really innovative. And one of the first use cases of an NFT being an access token to a software license. I think that's dope because all of a sudden $300 a year in tangible value is assigned to that token. And that's just the beginning. We can rinse and repeat. As soon as this is going to be a cool use case that we can point to a lot of these other technology companies that we're in talks with day to day. Like I think that there will be a future where like thousands of dollars worth of software are baked into like these same tokens, and like that becomes really compelling. And I can see that being sort of like an industry standard, in a sense. So yeah, again, like I love giving long-winded answers, but the short answer, MRR, that is the game, monthly recurring revenue.
Metaverse as a media company, where do you see that in the next year?
That's another one that I want to, as I said earlier before, let's talk about that again in a month and a half.
Understood. I'll leave it at.
But I do see it being the premier Web3 media outlet, but not just Web3, all emerging tech. And I do think it's like the analogy that I've been making. I think it's Complex meets The Verge. I think it's TechCrunch meets Hypebeast. I think it is the culture forward, most trusted, largest, and most active and engaged media outlet, not only in Web3, but for all of emerging tech. That's where I see it.
Thank you for elaborating on that, Roberto. And I kind of want to end it on that note in that regard, because everything that you guys have been doing is super innovative. And I'm really looking forward to what the news is going to be regarding Metaverse, because as I continuously elaborate on, that is a go-to place for me, a go-to place for education for me. And I'm super excited on everything that you guys have coming in the near future. With that being said, is there anything that you want to elaborate on that I missed throughout this conversation, Roberto?
Man, I just want to say I appreciate you, dude. Like the work that you're doing, when I said like consistency, getting the reps in, just like what you're doing, dude, like no question to me that you're going to be a massive success and like one of the biggest players and pioneers in the space. So many kudos to you, bro, just like for the day in, day out work that you're putting in and the passion that you're exemplifying. And yeah, definitely with like Metaverse, it's always started like education first, and transparency. And that's what it will always like continue to be. And like one of the things that's funny is like sometimes I get like hate comments because like I'll say something negative that happened in the space. And where some other media outlets are all just like positive, sort of pumping their bags. But like with Metaverse, like I've always said, like it's always going to be real. Like if something's going on that's bad, it's going to get covered. Like I'm not here. Like Metaverse doesn't exist to pump anybody's bags or mindlessly just hype up Web3, or NFTs. Like it's also gonna talk about like all the garbage that exists in the space, right? And so like I think that's what people can always expect from it is education, and unbiased sort of coverage, and just transparency and being genuine. So that's all I gotta say, man. I know I talk a lot, Zach, so I appreciate you having me on to run my motor mouth.
Roberto, once again, I appreciate you, and don't ever change, my friend, because what you say and how blunt you are and how you articulate yourself, a lot of us need to hear it from your point of view. A lot of us are usually in an echo chamber. So when you come in and you have such insight on advice and feedback, a lot of us need that. So Roberto, I appreciate you. And once again, thank you for your time. Blessings to you and the family. And I'm super bullish on what you guys have coming in the near future, my friend.
Likewise. Thank you, bro. Shout out Rug Radio. Shout out Zach Radio. And tell Farouk we say what's up.
Always, my guy. You have a blessed day and enjoy the rest of your weekend, my friend.
All right, brother. Appreciate you.
Always.